Now let's discuss Chapter 19, or the respiratory system. The respiratory system is basically lots of passages starting from the nose, and then it gets all the way down to the trachea and to the lungs. Everything pretty much from the nose until you reach the actual alveolus or the air sac. All of those are just passageways for air to go in. You'll find that the air needs to be moisturized and warmed up and filtered before it gets to the alveoli. But again, basically the majority of the respiratory system's function is to do that. It's not until we reach the air sacs where exchange of gases happen. And respiration is the process of exchanging gases, so oxygen and carbon dioxide are the gases that we are concerned with, between the atmosphere and body cells. So notice that we're saying the atmosphere and cells of the body, not the alveoli, not the air sacs. So respiration is a process of taking oxygen from the external environment, from the atmosphere surrounding us, and somehow taking that in and transporting it to every single cell in the body. Respiration involves lots of different events in order for that to happen. The first event is ventilation, which is the basic breathing in and out of air. And then there's external respiration, which means the exchange of gases at the level of the alveolus, where oxygen goes from the alveolus to the capillary in exchange for carbon dioxide, and then carbon dioxide will be exhaled to the atmosphere. Now that oxygen is inside of our capillaries, it needs to be transported from the lung to the different body cells. And in the body cells, there's another exchange that happens, and that's known as internal respiration, where exchange of gas between a capillary and body cells, which would be in the opposite direction. So oxygen now is delivered to the body cells, and in exchange, it gets carbon dioxide from the different cells of the body that were basically made due to waste products, due to the different metabolic reactions. Now that the cells took oxygen, these cells are going to breathe, and that is known as cellular respiration, which is the breakdown of glucose through glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. So all of these events would make respiration. Now, respiration, breathing kind of happens on a gross macroscopic level. We can actually see it happening. But the gas exchange is a part that happens on a microscopic level, something that happens at the level of the cells and the molecules. So we really cannot see it by the naked eye. And the respiratory system, basically what it needs to do is provide oxygen for aerobic reactions like cellular respiration. And in exchange, it will eliminate carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide in our body changes into carbonic acid. So carbon dioxide unites with water to make H2CO3, which is a carbonic acid. And that is why we equate the synthesis of carbon dioxide by cells with becoming acidotic. If there's just too much production of carbon dioxide, we can become acidotic, meaning we have too much acid in our body. And that is why, because again, carbon dioxide mixes with water to make H2CO3, which is known as carbonic acid. And this really helps in, either maintaining the internal environment, the pH of the inside of our body, or it can also mess it up if it's too much. The aerobic reactions of cellular respiration involve using the oxygen to make ATP, and while we do that, the cells generate carbon dioxide as a metabolic waste, and again, that would have to be transferred to the lungs and we exhale it. And again, you can see that infamous reaction for carbonic acid. So you want to really know this reaction very well because it is going to come back. It's extremely important in the respiratory system and in the renal system or the urinary system. Now let's go to the organs of the respiratory system. We kind of dove right into, different functions, but we didn't really talk about the different structures. So the respiratory system is divided into an upper respiratory tract and a lower respiratory tract. The upper respiratory tract is the nose, the nasal cavity, and the nasal sinuses. It also includes the pharynx and the larynx. The lower respiratory system is everything below the larynx. So that includes the trachea with the bronchial tree and the two lungs. Now the nasal cavity, that is basically the hollow space that is found behind the nostrils. There is a nasal septum that divides the nasal cavity into a right and a left side. And I'm actually going to go straight to the picture to kind of explain the different parts. Again, we have the nose where we start off with the nostrils. Okay, here you can see the nostrils maybe a little bit better. And this shows you the nasal septum. The posterior part of the nasal septum is made out of bone. The upper part is made out of the perpendicular plate of ethmoid, and the lower part is made out of the vomer bone. The anterior portion of the nasal septum is cartilage. Now, if you remove that nasal septum, you can find now the lateral wall of the nasal cavity. It is lined with a mucous membrane, and there are different what are known as concha. These look like shelves that are found on the lateral walls. There's a superior, middle, and inferior concha. Underneath each concha is a kind of like a hallway known as a meatus. So there's a superior, middle, and inferior meatus. And what this does is that when the air is being inhaled, because of these shells, because of the concha, the air starts to turbulate in there, and it absorbs some of the moisture, it warms the air up, and it also filters the air before it goes down into the lower respiratory tract. Something that, I kind of forgot to mention here is that the nostrils have hair, and that hair helps in trapping some of the particles, again, that are trying to get inside. So let's make sure we kind of covered everything. Oh, and the wrong way. The upper part of the mucous membrane here, this is where we have the olfactory mucosa, the olfactory epithelium, and that's how we smell. We kind of already covered that when we talked about the special senses. You'll see that the nasal cavity is lined with a mucous membrane made out of these cells, pseudostratified, ciliated, columnar epithelium with goblet cells. So we should know already that goblet cells make mucus. Okay, and then we have columnar epithelium with cilia. So together, both, the mucus and the cilia, both of them work together to trap dust particles. So you see here you can see your pseudostratified columnar epithelium, you could see the cilia on top, and you could see the mucus secreted by these goblet cells. What the mucus does is a very sticky kind of mucus where the dust particles tend to be trapped, and then that cilia will brush it down backwards. So if we don't blow our nose, if we don't blow that mucus and particles out, what happens is that cilia will sweep it back towards the pharynx, and then we end up swallowing it, and these particles are going to be destroyed in the stomach. Now for the sinuses, also known as the paranasal sinuses, these are cavities that are found in the skull. It provides a couple of different functions. Number one, it makes the skull a little bit lighter, okay? And number two, it provides resonance for waves as we speak. And you would notice that if you ever get a sinus infection and now the sinuses are full of inflammatory fluid or pus, or if you have allergies, your voice changes a little bit. And that is because now these cavities are no longer empty, they are full of a fluid. So again, your Paranasal sinuses are there to make the skull a little bit lighter, and provides the sound waves as we talk, gives us a little bit of resonance, and it does give us our very unique, or one of the ways that we get our unique voices. So where are these sinuses? Okay, there is one right above the orbit that is known as the frontal sinus. So full of air, you can see that it's dark in color, while the bone shows the white coloration on an X-ray. So again, here is the frontal sinus right on top of the orbit. You can find the maxillary sinus. These are found in the maxillary bones. We also have the ethmoid and sphenoid sinuses, and those again the name of the sinuses correspond to the bones that they're in. All of these sinuses are lined with a mucous membrane that is continuous with the mucous membrane of the nasal cavity, and they all drain into the nasal cavity. And this ends this portion.